Hello Year 11. The following presentation is taken from a presentation I gave on the afternoon tea and tips event last Thursday. I know that some of you were unable to make that, so I just thought it would be useful for you still to be able to access the advice that everybody else was given. So the presentation lasts about 15 minutes, and the aim by the end of it is for you to just understand really clearly how best you can revise to achieve success in your final exams. And an important thing being that you'll come away with some really practical tips on exactly what you can do to make sure you are revising in the best way possible. So I began by discussing exam rubric and introducing this idea to the people who were in the room. So many of you are really confident already in using exam rubric, but just in case, I will start from the very beginning by giving you an overview as to what an exam rubric is. So a rubric is a document which makes explicit the criteria by which students' assessments are marked. At Millthorpe, we recognise the value of exam rubric in supporting each student to understand how to make the progress necessary to achieve excellence in each subject. So to that end, we at Millthorpe have made sure that each department or GCSE subject has written an exam rubric that is regularly used within and outside of lessons to support teaching and learning, and includes, as a minimum, the 4 key parts. So in each of your subject's exam rubrics, you will find descriptions. So these might be task, assignment, exam overviews for each paper, and for example, grade boundaries. You will find criteria, so assessment objectives, mark schemes, inserts, formula grids, knowledge organisers, and perhaps top tips. You will find levels, so explicit success criteria for each level or grade point. And you will find standards, so model examples of answers at each grade point, including of course 100% answers with clear rationale and key points from examiners' reports. And in terms of what the exam rubrics actually look like, well, here are just a few examples of pages taken from a range of different subjects. So here we have, of course, geography, computer science there, looking at assessment objectives, sports studies, looking at grade boundaries. An example here from my own one in drama, looking at an overview of what to expect in the written exam. History here, we have typical exam questions. Mark scheme from art and design. German, listening top tips. Maths, we have examples of how not to do questions well, and then of course how to do them correctly. English language, key points from examiners' reports. And an example there of a knowledge organiser from music. So I'm often asked, what is the difference between a revision guide and an exam rubric? Well, the big difference is the fact that, of course, revision guides are made for anyone and everyone. Anyone can buy a revision guide. They're not specifically tailored, of course, to our students at Millthorpe School. Whereas exam rubrics are. They are made for you by your teachers, using, of course, their experience and expert knowledge of what helps you, our students, to achieve excellent final outcomes. And of course, they're also free, which is another great reason to make sure that you have exam rubrics for every single one of your subjects. But just having an exam rubric, of course, is not enough. I've been very lucky over the past few weeks to be able to interview lots of students for their Year 11 aspirations interviews, and something that came out from lots of those interviews time and again was students asking, how do I revise? Yes, we have the information, we have the exam rubrics, we have the revision guides, but how do we actually use them in the best possible way to make sure that we can achieve those excellent final outcomes? Well, let's start at the very beginning. So the word revision literally means to see again. And revision helps you to remember, of course, the important facts, figures, topics, and methods that you studied in the past, so that you're able to then recall these in the future, typically in an exam. However, not all revision is good revision, and this is a really common misconception. Passive revision, of the type of revision that I was encouraged to do when I was at school, such as rereading notes, highlighting and underlining text, or copying out notes, they actually are not the most effective ways to revise. These just involve you receiving information without actual meaningful engagement. And whilst these methods feel productive, research actually consistently shows that they have limited results. So, in other words, if you feel as though the work is really easy, are you really learning? In contrast, active revision requires you to engage actively with your subject material, which strengthens your memory pathways and triggers several cognitive processes that enhance learning, making information easier then to recall, of course, during your exam. The effort required in active revision is known as desirable difficulty, and it's this that improves long-term retention. Frankly, reading notes, underlining, highlighting, it's just not hard enough. It doesn't involve you in actively experiencing that desirable difficulty. So at Millthorpe, we know that students can best use our Fab 4 revision strategies alongside your exam rubrics in order to engage in effective active revision across all subject areas. So let's have a little look at what they actually involve. So I'm sure you will have heard these before, but at Millthorpe we recommend and guide students to use the following research-proven revision strategies. So our Fab 4 are: number 1, brain dumps; number 2, mind maps; number 3, flashcards; and number 4, self-quizzing. And why have we chosen these in particular to direct our students to use? Well, because quite simply, they work. Our years of experience have shown us that it's students who engage in this desirable difficulty offered by these types of revision strategies that actually achieve success in the end. So I'm just going to talk you through each of our Fab 4. So beginning with brain dumps. Now you're well used to using these. Of course, you have been using these right from Year 7. We have been training you to use brain dumps in form time. But what is the most effective way to do them? So number 1, we begin by deciding which focused area you want to revise. This might be a particular unit or topic. The key is it's specific. You give yourself a time limit, for example 10 minutes, and write down everything that you can remember about that topic. You then use highlighters to categorise the words or ideas into groups. Compare your brain dump to your knowledge organiser, correct misconceptions and add any information you missed in a different colour, before then storing your brain dump away in order to be able to revisit it later. This is not just reading notes, underlining, highlighting. This is actually involving you in thinking and recalling the knowledge that you already have. This is desirable difficulty. Number 2 are mind maps. So, to do a mind map effectively, you begin by deciding which focus area you want to revise. Again, a particular area of a unit or topic, and this time you have your knowledge organiser in front of you. You begin your mind map, place the main topic in the middle and identify subtopics that will branch off from there. Branch off again from your subtopics with further detail, but importantly don't include too much writing. The key to an effective mind map is that you make it easy to recall and therefore visual. Use pictures and colour to help this process, and ultimately place your completed mind maps in places where you can see them frequently. I remember when I was a student having them all around my bedroom so that I could just see them every single day, and that process of seeing them and becoming familiar with them helped that to go into my long-term memory. Our third Fab 4 revision strategy is flashcards. To do a flashcard effectively, you decide which focused area you want to revise and again have your knowledge organisers in front of you at the start of this process. Use perhaps different coloured flashcards for different topics. That will help ultimately with organisation. Write one clear question per flashcard. These should be questions that require short, specific, knowledge-based answers. Flashcards are not here to help you to develop your essay writing skills. They're here to help you be able to recall facts and knowledge. You then look at the question, write down your answer and check, or perhaps say your answers out loud and then of course check. The key thing is that you ultimately review your performance and use the lightness system to test your knowledge over time. So this graphic here shows you how to use the lightness system effectively to help flashcards close the gaps in your knowledge. So quite simply, you begin with all of your flashcards in one pile. As you test yourself, those that you are secure with can be stored away to revisit progressively less regularly. And you can see from the graphic here, they suggest kind of moving them up from every day to every other day and ultimately to just practicing once a month. Those that you're not confident with, you keep active to revisit more regularly until this knowledge then becomes secure. And of course, these kind of go down ultimately if you do not know them and up if you do. Our final Fab 4 revision strategy is self-quizzing. So with self-quizzing, as with all of our strategies, you begin by deciding which focus area you want to revise. You spend about 5 or 10 minutes reviewing knowledge using a knowledge organiser and then create 10 questions on the topic. Cover up your knowledge organiser and answer the questions importantly from memory. And then use your knowledge organiser to self-mark your answers in green pen. And it's this green pen marking, of course, that's really important because here it is that you are identifying the areas that you are less secure in. You then revisit the areas where there were gaps in knowledge and include these same questions next time and keep including these same questions until, of course, you become secure. So those are our Fab 4 revision strategies, and remember that they have been chosen because research has shown us that they enable students to achieve that desirable difficulty. As it says on the graphic here, learning should be challenging. The harder your brain works to retrieve the information, therefore the greater the learning. Ultimately though, it's repetition over time that helps you to create long-term memory. These Fab 4 revision strategies will not work if you just leave them to the night before the exam. So this idea of course, making sure that you repeat a little and often over time is really the way to achieve success. Now, I appreciate that no one wants to spend every single night for hours doing revision, and so we really encourage our students to use this Pomodoro technique. The Pomodoro technique is so named because the creator used a tomato-shaped kitchen timer to keep track of his work intervals. And it's really just that. It is a system of work-break cycles. No one wants to sit for hours and revise. You can improve your focus and productivity by breaking revision into focused, 15, 20, 25-minute intervals separated by short breaks of 5 minutes or so. And of course, in that time, that's the time you would use to be able to go and have a break, get a cup of tea, have a biscuit, whatever it is that will enable you to then feel refreshed in order to be able to tackle your next section of work. To summarise, the main sources of revision materials for students will come from perhaps Sparks and Seneca. Many subjects use these online tools, and you will know if your subject area, of course, has those. The rubric guides and knowledge organisers that I've been referring to in this presentation. Revision guides, which of course are available to purchase through your subject teachers. And podcasts and YouTube, which can also contain a wealth of information that students can find incredibly useful. So, the key to success year 11 is to be regular, be consistent, be specific, be focused, avoid distractions, difficult I know, but really important that you allow yourself the space to be able to focus and concentrate on the revision you are doing, and of course be comfortable, which will also help with that. Use the Fab 4 revision strategies. Make sure that if you are revising, it's difficult. Make sure you are experiencing that desirable difficulty. If you are not, you are probably not revising in the best possible way. And Pomodoro, so short work periods with breaks and rewards. Look after yourselves. Your well-being is important. No one wants to revise for hours and hours and hours without a break. It's really important, therefore, that you look after yourself and make sure that you are taking those breaks within your work periods. And of course, remember that every mark matters. As I said earlier, it only takes one mark to go from one grade boundary to another. So even though there is perhaps not an exam tomorrow, maybe even there isn't an exam next week, but beginning now with your revision, doing that little and often approach will quite simply ensure that by the time the exams come around in the summer, you feel completely confident and able to make sure that you get every mark possible.